Have you ever taken a bite of your favorite chocolate and wondered if something felt off? There was a time when candy felt simple, rich flavor, trusted names, and no second guessing what was inside. But lately, some folks are starting to ask quiet questions about what really changed behind the wrapper. Today at the Hidden Menu, we take a deep dive into what might be hiding in the chocolate aisle. So let us start with 1. Hershey's. Hershey's has been a household name for more than a century. For many Americans, it is the taste of Halloween nights, summer s'mores, and those foil-wrapped kisses handed out by grandparents. But behind that warm familiarity is a slow, quiet change most people have not noticed. In recent years, longtime fans have started to report something different in the flavor. A waxier texture, a flatter sweetness, a finish that does not linger the way it used to. Former employees and food industry analysts have suggested that cost-cutting measures may be part of the reason. Over time, ingredients like cocoa butter have quietly been reduced or replaced with cheaper alternatives like vegetable oil in certain products. And while the packaging still says chocolate, the legal definition in the US allows for a surprising amount of wiggle room. One retired confectioner explained that small shifts in ingredients are often phased in over time so that most customers will not notice. Until one day, the bar just does not taste the way it did before. Online reviews back this up, with longtime Hershey's fans saying the texture is chalkier or that it melts strangely in the mouth now. Even overseas, American-made Hershey's bars are sometimes refused by foreign chocolate shops due to differences in recipe and quality. The familiar brown wrapper gives a sense of comfort, but what is inside may not live up to the memory. And it is not just about ingredients. There have also been quiet changes in sourcing practices, with watchdog groups reporting inconsistent transparency in where cocoa is sourced and how labor is managed. While Hershey's has published sustainability goals, critics argue that many promises remain vague or aspirational. The company has made headlines in the past for lawsuits related to its supply chain and ethical sourcing. None of this is printed on the package, of course. You just unwrap the bar, take a bite, and assume you are getting what you always got. That is the part they count on, the memory being stronger than the moment. Over time, those little differences add up until what you are eating now is something else entirely. And unless you are paying close attention, you may not even notice what was quietly taken away. 2. Nestlé Crunch. Nestlé Crunch was once the perfect mix of snap and sweetness. That red and blue wrapper sitting on drugstore shelves or dropped into your Halloween bucket felt like a treat you could trust. But over the years, many chocolate lovers have started to sense something's changed, and not just the packaging. What used to be a crisp, airy bite with a rich chocolate shell now feels thinner, sweeter, and somehow less satisfying. Some longtime fans have described the bar as tasting more like sugar than chocolate, with the familiar crunch feeling more like a crumble. Food bloggers and reviewers have pointed to changes in Nestlé's production standards over the years, especially after licensing rights for the Crunch brand were sold in the United States. The formula shifted slightly, but those slight changes add up. The Rice Crisps are smaller, the chocolate coating thinner, and the cocoa content dialed back to cut costs. One former production employee noted that adjustments in tempering and cooling time were made to speed up production, resulting in a texture that just does not feel the same in your mouth. And while Nestlé globally has made pledges toward ethical sourcing, critics argue that actual compliance is spotty, and consumer trust has quietly eroded. You will not find a sign in the store saying the bar has changed. It just happens, silently, over time. One loyal fan posted online that she kept buying Crunch bars year after year, hoping that one would finally taste like it used to, but it never did. The color scheme is still familiar, the name is still the same, but the feeling? That is what disappeared. The nostalgia runs deep for people who grew up with Crunch bars in their lunchboxes or as movie night favorites. And that memory often keeps them coming back, even when their taste buds are telling a different story. The thing is, once you start noticing the difference, it is hard to unnotice. But by then, the original version may be long gone. 3. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups have been a staple of American candy aisles for generations. The balance of salty sweet peanut butter wrapped in milk chocolate felt almost perfect. But today, many fans are quietly saying something just does not taste right anymore. It is not just nostalgia talking. There have been subtle changes in both texture and flavor that are hard to ignore once you notice them. Some describe the chocolate as greasier, the peanut butter less crumbly and more pasty. According to former manufacturing staff and food scientists, that may be due to adjusted oil blends and stabilizers introduced to increase shelf life and cut manufacturing costs. The peanut butter filling, once grainy and nutty, has become smoother, more processed, and less distinct. One longtime fan compared a recent bite to peanut butter flavored frosting rather than the real thing. In online forums, loyal customers compare older versions to current ones, pointing out changes not only in taste but even in smell. Former plant workers have noted that as demand increased, so did pressure to standardize every bite, often at the expense of nuance and ingredient quality. And while these tweaks might not seem dramatic on their own, over time they alter the experience entirely. You still get the orange wrapper, the crinkled paper cup, and that familiar shape, but the soul of it feels a little different. And then there is the issue of size. Over the years, standard Reese's cups have quietly gotten smaller. A few grams trimmed here and there, barely noticeable unless you are comparing older packages side by side. Some fans even measure and post those differences online as proof. It is not a glitch, it is a strategy. Quiet shrinkflation disguised in plain sight. Meanwhile, special editions and seasonal versions continue to flood the shelves, sometimes masking these changes with novelty and distraction. But those who loved the original can feel it. They keep reaching for it, hoping that maybe this time it will be like before. And that quiet hope is what keeps the barcodes scanning, even when the taste has already moved on. 4. Milky Way. Milky Way used to feel like the perfect indulgence. Smooth caramel, soft nougat, and that blanket of chocolate that made it melt just right in your hand. For many, it was the candy bar that felt a little more grown up, something you reached for when you wanted something richer than a typical treat. But lately, that satisfaction seems to come with a quiet question mark. Longtime fans have noticed that the bar feels lighter, almost airy in a way that is less about texture and more about what is missing. Some say the caramel tastes thinner, less buttery than it once did. Others point out that the chocolate coating does not feel as creamy, leaving behind a film instead of a finish. Former employees from factories that produce Milky Way have shared that changes were made over the years to reduce ingredient costs, modifying caramel cook times, swapping in lower-cost dairy solids, and tightening up the ratio of nougat to chocolate. One former line supervisor recalled the shift in texture happened gradually over the course of several production cycles. The bars were technically still Milky Way, but they did not feel the same anymore. Add to that the growing presence of smaller bar sizes with fun size and mini editions filling more shelf space than the originals. That quiet shrinkage has made it even harder to compare new bars to the ones you remember. Marketing campaigns stay focused on nostalgia and flavor, but behind the scenes, there is a different story. Industry insiders have pointed out that the soft nougat center is now made with different stabilizers that increase shelf life but reduce richness. Over time, it becomes hard to tell whether the bar changed or if we did. But when so many people start asking the same question, did this always taste like this? You have to wonder. One lifelong fan wrote in a candy blog that the magic was not gone, just dulled, like a memory blurred by time. Milky Way bars still offer sweetness, but the kind that leaves you chasing something that may no longer be there. And once that craving becomes a habit, it is easy to forget what you were really looking for in the first place. If any of this sounds familiar so far, take a moment to like the video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the hidden menu so you do not miss what's still quietly changing on the shelves. 5. Butterfinger. Butterfinger has always been a bit of an oddball, in the best way. Crunchy, flaky, peanut buttery, with a texture that seemed engineered for that satisfying snap between your teeth. For decades, it was one of those candy bars you either loved or did not understand. But in recent years, even the fans have started to notice something's off. It started quietly with whispers in comment sections and candy forums. It doesn't taste like it used to. In 2018, the recipe was officially changed after Ferrero took over the brand. And while the company called it an improvement, many loyal customers felt something had been lost. The texture became less flaky, more dense. The signature snap turned into a chew, and the coating seemed to melt differently, more like chocolate like product than true chocolate. One candy reviewer compared the new version to a bad Halloween knockoff, and dozens of commenters agreed. The peanut butter center, once gritty and rich, was now smoother, with a strange aftertaste some described as artificial citrus. Ferrero claimed the change was part of an effort to improve ingredients and modernize the flavor. But for those who had grown up with the old Butterfinger, it felt like a betrayal. Even the packaging got sleeker, glossier, more polished, less like the rough around the edges candy they remembered. And that is part of the larger trend. Brands updating legacy treats to feel more premium, while quietly alienating the people who built their success. One former Nestle food scientist noted that older recipes were more temperamental but more flavorful. The new versions prioritize shelf stability, cost efficiency, and simplified supply chains. And while that might make business sense, it changes the experience in subtle but noticeable ways. There is still crunch, still flavor, but the soul of it feels tampered with. People bite in hoping to reconnect with the past, but the past does not bite back. And when candy stops feeling fun and starts feeling unfamiliar, something deeper gets lost. 6. M&Ms. M&Ms have always been the reliable candy. Whether they were melting in your hand or scattered in a party bowl, they felt timeless, colorful, familiar, and simple. But even here, in something as basic as sugar-coated chocolate, quiet changes have slipped in over time. Many fans have pointed out that the chocolate inside M&Ms does not taste the way it used to. Some say it is sweeter, others say it is more bitter. Either way, it is not what they remember. That smooth melt has become grittier, the balance of milkiness and cocoa less consistent. Former Mars factory workers have noted recipe tweaks made over the years to accommodate faster production cycles and lower ingredient costs. Chocolate batches that once simmered for hours now move through streamlined tempering systems designed for speed and output. The result? A product that is technically the same, but subtly off. Even the candy shell feels thinner in some batches, with colors that fade quicker under light. And it is not just the classic M&Ms. Over the past decade, the brand has introduced dozens of new varieties, flavors, and seasonal additions. This flood of innovation has made it harder for fans to find the classic version they grew up with, and even when they do, it often tastes different. One longtime fan wrote that the peanut M&Ms now feel greasy, with a thinner shell and a strange aftertaste that lingers. Others say the mini versions taste closer to the original than the regular-sized ones, suggesting quiet manufacturing differences between formats. And then there are the marketing changes. Over the years, M&M's branding has become louder, glossier, and more corporate. Less like a treat, more like a product. That branding shift has masked some of the changes in taste and texture, giving the illusion of consistency while the product itself evolves underneath. For many, the bag still offers comfort, but the bite reveals something else. It is not a dramatic shift. It is just enough to make you pause and wonder if the candy changed or if your memory is playing tricks. Either way, what was once a sure thing now feels just a little bit uncertain. 7. Baby Ruth. Baby Ruth bars used to be messy in the best possible way. A thick tangle of peanuts, caramel, nougat, and chocolate. Impossible to eat cleanly, but always satisfying. There was a heaviness to it, a richness that made it feel like more than just candy. But over the years, that signature weight has started to feel lighter, less dense, less bold. Many longtime fans have said the bar now feels overly sweet, the peanut crunch reduced to something softer, more processed. Some even say it tastes closer to a generic gas station snack than the nostalgic classic they remember. After Ferrero took over the brand from Nestle, packaging was refreshed and new marketing promised a return to better ingredients. But what many people noticed instead was a thinner chocolate coating, a chewier nougat, and a more uniform texture that felt manufactured rather than handcrafted. One former factory worker recalled how the older production line used to require extra care because of the bar's irregular shape. Now, she said, the machines are streamlined for consistency, and the ingredients have changed to fit that mold. Instead of bold, crunchy layers, today's Baby Ruth often arrives with softened edges and a flavor that fades too quickly. It is not just about taste, it is about feel. The old Baby Ruth stuck to your teeth, crumbled in your hand, and made you work for every bite. Now it breaks too easily, the layers blending into each other like one indistinct mass. Peanut fans have noted that the ratio of caramel to peanuts has shifted, and not in favor of the nuts. Others point to how the bar no longer has that salty contrast that once balanced the sweetness. One candy reviewer said it best: they made it cleaner, but they also made it duller. The charm of Baby Ruth was always its imperfection, its chaotic texture, its unapologetic heft. What's left now feels like an echo of that spirit, tidier, shinier, and somehow more forgettable. It is not that the new bar is bad, it is just that the old one was better. And once you notice the difference, it is hard not to miss the mess. 8. Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers was once a symbol of indulgence without heaviness. The whipped nougat center, coated in milk chocolate, felt airy and light, a candy bar you could enjoy without regret. But today, many fans say that lightness has tipped too far. What was once rich and fluffy now feels bland and insubstantial. Some describe it as tasting more like chocolate-scented sugar foam than an actual candy bar. The texture, once the defining feature, has changed from silky to spongy. Former confectionery workers have explained that the nougat formula was adjusted over time to reduce ingredient costs and simplify large-scale production. Whipping times were shortened and stabilizers were added to help the bars keep their shape longer in transit. The result? A texture that feels less like mousse and more like packing material. And the chocolate coating, once thick enough to balance the airy center, has been thinned down in recent years. One former quality control manager noted that the coating thickness was reduced to meet calorie targets without shrinking the overall bar. But calorie math comes at a cost. Less chocolate means less flavor, and when the center has already been muted, the whole experience falls flat. Some customers say it no longer melts in your mouth the way it used to. Others compare it to eating sweetened memory foam. The problem is not just one ingredient. It is a series of small compromises stacked over time. Each one excused as minor, each one passed quietly from one corporate meeting to the next. You still get the same shiny wrapper, the same promise of 3 times the pleasure. But the first bite tells a different story now, and the second bite only confirms it. You keep eating, hoping it will click into place, like it used to when you were younger, when it felt more indulgent, more fun, more something. But it never quite does. And the disappointment is not loud. It is quiet, like realizing you forgot the taste of something you once knew by heart. If you grew up in America, chances are candy bars were part of your childhood rhythm. A treat after school, a reward for good behavior, something sweet on a summer road trip. The names never changed, just the wrappers, the ads, and maybe the price. But underneath that surface, something else has shifted. Slowly, quietly, the flavors that once defined those brands have begun to slip away. And for many people, it happened without them ever realizing it. One bite here, one bar there, and the memory doesn't quite match the taste. This is not just about chocolate, it is about trust, about the unspoken deal between companies and customers. Keep the name, keep the flavor, keep the feeling. But over time, that deal was renegotiated behind closed doors. Ingredient lists were trimmed, cooking processes altered, and formulas rewritten in the name of profit margins and production speed. Every small change was just that, small. But they stacked. A little less cocoa here, a touch more filler there, a faster whip or a thinner shell. Until what used to be a candy bar you could close your eyes and recognize turned into something that only looked the same. For older customers, the change is more obvious. They remember the difference because they tasted it in another time. But for younger generations, this is the only version they know. The reformulated one. The modern, efficient, shelf-stable version of a thing that used to be messy, bold, and full of flavor. And that raises a quiet kind of sadness. Not because candy needs to be perfect, but because it used to feel like it mattered. It used to say something about how simple pleasures were still allowed to be real. The candy aisle is full of familiar names, but they're not all telling the same story anymore. Some are echoing memories they can't quite live up to. Others are polished versions of a past they no longer resemble, and most people will keep buying them out of habit, out of comfort, or out of hope that maybe this time it will taste the way it used to. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But for those who notice, who still taste with memory, not just the tongue, it becomes harder to pretend. Harder to take that wrapper, tear it open, and believe it holds what it once did. Still, we keep reaching, because somewhere in that bite is a moment we want to remember. If any of these changes tasted familiar to you, or if there is a chocolate brand you remember differently, share your story in the comments, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to the hidden menu so you never miss what they're not telling you. And remember, the truth is not always on the menu.